Our next segment is going to be about getting ready for VexIQ tournaments. So welcome everybody. My name is Andrew Dolan. I am not a VexIQ coach, but I've been to a whole bunch of VexIQ and VRC tournaments, and this segment is going to be about getting ready for that VexIQ tournament. There are so many things happening at these events. What do you do? Where do you start? And so we've brought in a couple of IQ seasoned coaches that are going to help us out with this. We have Robert Fay joining us, and he's probably, what do you have, like 5 IQ teams now? I'm not sure what the numbers are, because they always, you know, it's like chips, potato chips. You can't have just one IQ team. You got to have like 5 of them or 6 of them, right?
Or I have 8 of them.
You have 8 of them.
Possibly 10 this year, but
yeah,
8 was my number last year.
That's crazy. And the other person we bring in here is Jared Sanger, and he does all kinds of stuff. How many VexIQ teams have you been responsible for kind of kicking off?
Well, I've had anywhere from probably 6 to 10 IQ teams in a season, so you know, it changes year to year, but yeah, around about 6 to 10.
All right, so we're just going to have a discussion here about getting ready for that IQ tournament. So number one of the big things we want to share with you guys is the thing called the Code of Conduct. There's lots of eyes at a tournament, and pieces of this are, number one, that your students are basically behaving. We can share with you guys the Code of Conduct text up here. This is a great thing to share with the team at the beginning of the season to make sure that they understand that when they go to one of these events, everybody's watching. Even when they're walking down the hallway, somebody's probably watching. You could have a judge volunteer, somebody that's, there are eyes everywhere. And when a team is misbehaving or acting outside of this code of conduct, there's a chance that that can get back into the judge's room and affect decisions being made about sportsmanship, about their performance at the event. So it's important, you know, not only because there's eyes watching, but this is just a great thing to do in general. Be positive, respectful, ethical conduct of students. Those are all great things that we should always be doing. Act with integrity. Another component of this is that it's student-centered, and this is a hard piece for some parents and coaches that want to get their hands in there and let me fix that robot, let me program it, let me build it. That is against the ethos of Vex Robotics. This is student-centered, so the students are to do the work, and sometimes the hardest thing as a coach is to sit there and watch your students fail. It's okay to fail. It's great for them to fail. So I'm going to kick that back over to Jared and Robert here for a second and say, you know, just add to those comments, you know, what does student-centered mean to you guys, and what things maybe are really irritating when you see as far as code of conduct and student-centered competition?
Yeah, the student-centered part is huge. When you're walking around in the pit area, the people that should have their hands on that robot are those kids. Now, if you're a mentor or an advisor and you're trying to point and teach a concept, that's fine. You can be doing that. But if you're walking through and you look over and there's no kids in your pit area and there's an adult in there reassembling a mechanism on that robot, that's a big no-no, and you want to avoid anything like that, because that will be reported if it's seen, and it could end up leading to disqualification from an event. So that's something to be very careful with. Let the kids do the work, point at things, point them in the right direction, show them examples, lead them to places, but don't build that robot for them. Do not, don't get in there with your hands. Let the kids do that. So, Robert?
Yeah, so I'll kind of, 2 things. Behavior is a big thing. Especially I deal a lot with elementary students that sometimes this is their first team organization, some of their first competition. So outlining that, if you were here earlier, Brandy was talking about the contracts you have with your students, outlining their behavior, and the code of conduct is a great thing to have in that contract. Take those pieces and have that. Secondly, student-centered, understanding the limited adult interaction, and understanding that adult interaction is okay as you're teaching the concepts. You know, I always like to have lots of different pieces in my classrooms. I have a lot of gearing examples that sit up that show, you know, big gears to small gears, different arms, things like that. Pieces that the students can use to learn and implement into their robots. I also like to measure, you know, the effectiveness on that, on my students' ability to handle a tournament all day on their own. A lot of times because I have such young students, second, third graders, I often have a parent who has not been involved in the day-to-day practice help with time management. The one thing I found is getting third graders to watch the clock and say, hey, my next match is at 10:15 is a little hard. So I have adults that help, hey, you guys have a match in 5 minutes. Let's get your stuff. But I usually kind of pride myself a little bit on I don't have to be in the pits with my students, because I've got them to the point, I've coached them to the point where they can do all of that on their own. If something breaks, they can do that. I often find myself running around the pits because team this needs a stopper and they're missing one. So how can we facilitate getting those kind of things and finding things? But you know, that the students should be able to fix a robot themselves. If there's a programming thing at the tournament, they can do that. And that usually shows that even though you've helped in that coaching, it's student-centered. They're involved heavily enough that they understand how to take over and run that. Maybe take over is not the right word, but you know, they're able to do that without your interaction there, because they've been such a center of that as you've taught them. I equate it a lot, you know, if you played basketball or something like that, you know, once the game starts, it's theirs. You've done everything to get them there. You know, same thing. If something breaks, something needs to be run, you've helped there to the point they can do that.
All right. So, getting ready for that VEX IQ tournament. Let's go through like the basics in sequential order of what it's going to take to get ready. So, it begins with getting the vehicle packed up and remembering stuff. Now, you've probably been to tournaments before, and maybe you forgot something. So give me your rundown of quick things you gotta have before you even leave for the tournament, and make them quick, because we're gonna kind of segment through each piece of a tournament to, you know, tips and tricks here.
Well, I'm going to step back just a little bit before that, and I'm going to go day one. We're going to learn the manual, and we're going to create a checklist of what we need to take. So before we've even talked about this, we know the game, and what do we need? We need a robot, we need a controller, we need 2 people, a battery. We actually create a checklist, so before we get to that, the students have their list of what they need, and they understand the game because they've went through that game manual, so they know what they need to play that game.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there's also, you know, there's a checklist resource that they provide for you too, I believe. They did at one time anyway, and that's usually, you can find it in the documents page on robot events. But there's a what to expect document that will help you out with things like, you know, what to expect when you check in and team pit area. So there's lots of good stuff in that document. So anytime you go to register for a tournament, you'll click on that tournament name and go to that page, and there's a document section, and then you'll look for what to expect. Lots of good information in that document. So big thing that I would keep in mind is when you buy, say you get super kits for the VEX IQ, they come with one USB cord. You have a controller and you have a brain, and they both need to be charged. So you may want to look into purchasing some extra USB cords and maybe one of those power bank chargers, so that you can have all your devices plugged in and ready to rock for the next day. And it's just easier if you have those extra cords, so you can get all your devices charging.
All right, so you got your gear. You're ready to go. Everything's there. It arrived. The team is all there. This is good stuff. You get to the event. What is your first thing you got to do when you arrive at the physical venue?
You have to check your teams in.
Why would I bother to check my teams in? What do you mean? I'm here. Can't they see? They got eyeballs.
They need to know if your team is there so that they can populate a match schedule, so that they know whether to if you've been inspected or not. There's lots of reasons why. They will collect your engineering design notebook or your team's notebook at the check-in typically, or they'll have a process outlet if you're doing digital notebooks, how to check those in. So lots of good stuff there. They might have some specific information at the check-in table for that event. Maybe they have a specified area for charging things. I've gone to VEX IQ events where they have charging areas where there's lots of power cords, places to charge your device, because their pits might not have power in those spots. So good thing to do.
The schedule on robotevents.com said I should be there at 10 o'clock. Okay? Because that's when the venue opens, and then check-in is at noon. So actually, I don't have to. Our inspection must be completed by noon, so I don't have to be there till noon, right?
No, I would say that's incorrect. Yeah, no, I would try to be there earlier. In my experience, you check in, and a lot of times your teams are going to still be wrenching on their robots and doing some things. So you want to have a little bit more time before they can, so that they have time to get through the inspection process.
Oh, what's inspection? Tell me about this.
Yeah, well, every event, your robots will have to be inspected. There is inspection criteria. There's a document on there, and an inspection checklist that I would recommend that you have printed out before you even go to the event, and make sure your teams go through that checklist, and just to make sure the robot's ready to roll, and have them physically check it off, go through all that stuff. And I think Robert's pulling this up now, so we can cut over that.
Take a peek at that inspection checklist. This should be printed off well in advance of the tournament, and the team should know all of the criteria. It's a rotten deal when you're outside of the constraints of the inspection checklist and you show up for the event. That's a bad way to start the day.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these inspection checklists, they're not hidden. They're public. They're out there. This should be day one, in my opinion. Same thing when you're going through the game manual. You should have this inspection checklist, so there's no questions for your team. It's frustrating for the students as well as the people trying to get everybody registered and get the tournament up and going. If you have somebody come and, VEX IQ, our size is 11 by 20 by 15, and you have somebody show up and they're 15 by 20, and they're like, what's this size requirement?
What is this size thing you speak of?
So, that's, I would say that's day one. Maybe the one other thing that's before that too is understanding how the tournament flows and the teamwork portion of it. That's something as a coach. Again, day one.
Okay, so let's elaborate on this. Okay, you showed up, you checked in, they know you're here. Now you've got your robot inspected. You passed inspection. You knew about this checklist thingy in advance, and you pre-checklist your robot, so you're good to go. And now what?
So once everybody is checked in and inspected, they'll create a tournament schedule that will tell you when your matches are. And those are going to be for IQ, your teamwork matches. The other thing, because you understand what's going on, you probably have skills matches, which there's driver skills and there's programming skills.
That's too many things going on at once.
It's a lot of stuff going on.
So you have to worry about getting your teams to the competition fields at specific times.
Yes.
And that's probably the most important piece.
Yes.
And then secondary, in between your competition times and maybe if there's a lunch break or something to that effect, you can sneak away and get over to this other field that's called the Skills Challenge?
Yes. And so, just like if you've watched the video, there's different ways to play the game. The skills is, and for the individual tournament, it may seem secondary, but the one thing I know, like here in Minnesota, other places, there's a lot of teams that end up qualifying for state because they did skills. So even if you may not win skills, you may not be the highest ranked, it is important that you do that, because your teams that may not win a tournament, may not get that qualifying spot, may end up getting one rolled down to them because they participated in skills. So, again, that's in the game manual. It'll tell you the rules, how to play it, what you have to do. There's different things you can do in skills that you can't do in other matches. Some interaction pieces, different things like that. I'm not going to go through that, and they change every year. So read the game manual, check the official Q&A. But definitely as a coach, make your students aware, and this is not something they should be trying to learn at the tournament. They're going to learn how it flows at the tournament, but they should be aware before the tournament that these things exist.
So their qualification match schedules is they have specific times, and the skills is just this free-for-all? Like whenever you want, show up?
Yeah, so the skills will typically start in the morning before qualification matches even starts, and then they'll run until the elimination rounds, which we'll talk about next, I'm assuming. But there will be qualification rounds, and typically on the event, the skills tournament will end when elimination rounds start, or when they start to, or when they wrap up qualification rounds, I should say. So you'll have the opportunity to participate in 3 autonomous programming runs and 3 driver-controlled runs. So what happens with that tournament is they'll take your highest score out of your autonomous portion, and they'll take your highest score out of your driver portion and combine those for a total score. And that's how they base the rankings, is based off
Well,
your highest
it's not like
scores.
there's a separate award for skills.
There is.
What?
Yes, there is a separate award for skills. And I think that typically the regional tournament, the state tournament, you can get an invite if you win that, or it can get rolled down to you.
Okay,
right?
so at this time during the qualification rounds, you've got scheduled times for your team to be at the competition field. You got skills that you've got to try to fit in, and that's it. That's all that's happening during that time. There's not like anybody interviewing you during that time too, is there?
Yeah, you also generally have judges depending on how the tournament is set up. You could have pre-judging for certain things where there's judging done online, like if there's digital notebooks submitted. Those are going to be called out on robotevents.com. When you go into the information on there, it's going to tell you what kind of judging format you have, whether it's in person or not. If that's being done, that will be intermittent throughout the tournament. You'll see judges in the pits or designated areas.
So random judge volunteers will approach my VEX IQ team in their pit area. How are they even going to find them? Because they might be at skills, or they might be at their actual matches. There's just too much going on.
There is. No. Generally speaking, you're going to have an opening ceremony in the morning, and your event partner who's putting that on is going to talk about judging and how that's going to happen. And they're going to make you aware that time when you are not at the field, you should have a representative or somebody back at your pits if they're going to have people going around to your assigned pits. I know in Thief River Falls last year, actually, because we had so many teams and so many different things, we actually assigned times for the teams to go meet with the judges, and the judges actually had judge tables the teams went to. So that can be set up by the event partner to do different things, but they'll give some instructions, but there will be a time where those judges will be coming around talking to you. And the other thing is, even when they're not talking to you, there's judges and volunteers that are watching you.
They're
and that
always
kind of
watching.
comes back to that code of conduct. And, you know, you have a team T-shirt, you have your school shirt on, you have something that identifies you. People are watching and paying attention to that.
Okay, now, how do you, as a coach, prepare your students for that judge interview? You know, do you run mock interviews back at your school or organization? How do you prepare them to be interviewed by strange people?
So what I do, I actually have a few different teachers. So they're not strange to them, but I have a few different volunteer teachers that come in. I give them a judge rubric, which is something we can try and pull that up. But there are rubrics out there that you can pull up. Again, they're public, and I walk through those with my students. I actually printed up poster size rubrics that hang on the wall, so my students can understand what the judges are looking for, points you want to bring across. And then I give those to teachers that come in on our practices and ask questions so the students can try and work through that in practice.
That's cool stuff. Now, those rubrics that you have, I'm sure the judges are using the same ones. And when you're done with the tournament, then, the judges are going to give you the rubrics at the end of it?
They will not.
Well, I want to see my score, though. I want to see how I did.
Nope. Everything will be completely confidential in the judging room, and those documents are to be destroyed. So you will never see a rubric of how you did in your judge interview. So if you do mock interviews, that's a good time for that before the event, and have other people come in and maybe visit with your teams. But they will not have a chance to see their rubrics. They will be destroyed, and they're confidential. We did pull up the rubric here. I actually got to this page. If you go to, again, any event that you're signing up for, there's a judging guidelines section in the documents portion of that event page, and inside of that there's a ton of different things, for different things for judging related topics, but the rubric's included in there as well. So you'll see things like the engineering design process, game strategies, robot design, robot build, robot programming. So you have all this list of things, and they have the rubric there with what they would expect an expert or proficient team to. We have a question out here in the audience.
So the question is, or a statement is, it's a misconception that the guide to judges is strictly for the judges' eyes. It's also for the competitors and the coaches. It's a tool. Yep, it's a tool for the teams to use, and certainly having the rubrics posted inside of your lab space would be a great tool as a reminder, like, hey, we should always be thinking about these criteria that the volunteer judges are going to evaluate us on.
Well, and one thing I think it always helps my teams with, especially with younger IQ teams, is the rubrics really help understanding what an engineering notebook should be. Because as much as this talks about, the interview, a lot of this stuff we talk about, okay, the design process. Did you guys note that in your notebook? Your game strategy, is that noted in your notebook? So it's not just that you can talk about it, but helping to get that documented. Because I do have a lot of struggles with my teams getting those students to document what they're doing, especially with younger kids. If something doesn't work, they just want to rip it apart and try something else. And taking pictures and documenting those things, the rubrics have really helped me get those students to document those processes and those pieces because they see that the judges will be looking for those things in their notebooks.
All right, now when the competitors are there at the tournament, all this stuff is happening. Okay, they're supposed to follow all these rules and whatnot. So the students are pretty much just like robots, and they're not having any fun whatsoever. Is that the way of it?
Oh no, there's lots of time for fun. There's an agenda. There's certain things they have to do, but there's a lot of other things going on too. I mean, the cheering, watching the events, the time you're working on robots, things like that. Some tournaments you'll find there's extra things going on. Last year, just for fun, there was actually a cornhole tournament going on during my robotics tournament. And so the students, they're busy, to say the least. But
Yeah.
I've never had any of my students come back afterwards and be like, oh, that was the most boring thing I've ever. No, they're excited. When is the next one? They're really busy getting those things. Sometimes with the younger, especially the IQ ones, you do need a little bit of that direction because they'll get so excited watching other teams' robots, different things. Even going out, especially some of these mixed tournaments, I'll have elementary students with middle school, and the elementary kids from our town will see middle school kids from a different town, and they'll want to go, how did you do that? Can you show me how you did that? And, sometimes you got to pull them back in because, hey, we still have a meet in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So you have to do that, but
It's a party.
it-
I mean,
it
that's
is.
another way to look at these tournaments is it's their celebration of their accomplishments, and other teams love just coming up and talking to your teams about what you're doing, what they've learned, what works, what doesn't. But also, they're being loud. They're cheering ridiculously loud. They're wearing amazing costumes, the matching T-shirts. They're making a big splash in that scene. And there's even like judged awards based on some of the energy and enthusiasm that teams can bring to an event.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about being in a tournament is it's unlike any other activity. If you go to, a baseball tournament, you're not going to see coaches collaborating and talking about their game strategy or sharing it. And if you go to a tournament, a lot of times the teams will go up and say, hey, we noticed you did this in the event. Why did you do that? And they might explain it. Sometimes they might not, but a lot of times they're willing to share.
So as a new coach, I want to just key into that for a second. If I'm a brand new coach, you're telling me that I can go to a tournament and I can talk to other coaches that have done this longer than 2 months.
Absolutely, absolutely. Go around, talk to. If you see a program that's got 12 teams there, they've probably been around for a while. It's a good opportunity to go find somebody to talk to.
Yep. And this is actually an interesting time to bring up the REC has a mentor program. I don't know if that's what you were going to talk about. Oh, the suggestion is take your team as a field trip to an event before you actually have to compete in one. That's smarts. Yes. And the REC is implementing a mentor program. Is that for VRC as well as VexIQ? Okay. But look on the REC Foundation webpage for mentor programs. We have some people here in the room that have done the mentorship program and been able to have an experienced coach paired with a brand new coach and bring some of that expertise and input into the brand new coach's perspective there.
The one thing I'd say, I haven't done a field trip with any new students, but YouTube is kind of wonderful for this because there are a ton of tournaments that are on YouTube. And so you can actually go and watch some of the teamwork stuff happen. You don't get the whole experience, but you can help show, especially if you have students, elementary students who have not been to a VI or an IQ tournament. I got to get used to all those letters now. If they haven't been there, one of the things I always get asked the first time they go practice a match is, did I win? And no, we're working together. And even no matter how many times I do that, well, which team won? Guy, in explaining some of that, I deal with second and third graders, so sometimes that's hard. But watching some of the tournaments and how the scores are tabulated and watching the finals on YouTube, that's helped a lot with understanding some of that flow and what's going on.
Sweet. So I'm going to wrap this up here because I think we're done with the tournament now, right? We did everything because you went through your matches and you did your skills and you got judged, and it seems like that's enough for the day. So we're just gonna. Is that it? They're done then, right?
Yeah, so I think Robert started touching on this with the teamwork. So throughout the day, they're going to have an opportunity to compete in like 6 to 8 matches. It all depends on the tournament and how the event partner sets that up. But they'll have multiple opportunities to do teamwork challenge where they're working together with another robot to try to get the highest score possible. They're not necessarily competing against other teams. They're competing with another team to get a high score. And what that does is it creates a ranking system based on their average high score throughout the event out of those 6 to 8 matches. And then what ends up happening once we get to the end of the qualification rounds is we have a ranking. We have a number 1 ranked team, a number 2 ranked team, possibly all the way down to 32, whatever the ranking is. But what ends up happening is they partner up teams from top to bottom. The top 2 ranked teams are the highest alliance. Then the next 2 teams will be partnered together and going all the way down. And you get, I think it's called a step ladder tournament type of a deal, where the bottom 2 ranked teams that are competing in the alliances will start first, and they'll work as hard as they can to get a high score and set the bar, and then the next 2 ranked teams try to beat that. So you don't really know who's going to win the tournament until the very final match, and that will be determined based off of whether they beat the scores below them or not.
So on that, I was at the National EP Summit, and there's this really cool thing that one team was doing. They called it the hot seat. So when you have the highest score, you're going through that elimination rounds, or step bracket, whatever it's called. They had a couch up on the stage, and they call it the hot seat. So the team with the highest score got to hang out there in that couch in the hot seat while the next matches are being played. And if the next match that's played has a higher score, then they get to sit in the hot seat. And it was like the coolest thing because you can see the enthusiasm of the teams while it's happening, and they're happy to be there. And if they can stay put that whole round through the step elimination, that's a pretty cool place to be. Yes, great sponsorship for your local furniture company was a comment here. So you could get your, home furniture or whatever it is to sponsor the couch and have that out there, park a couch up there, $500 sponsorship or whatever you need. I like it. So that you've crowned your winner of the tournament as far as that performance. And what would the title be if they were to have that highest score in the elimination?
They'd be the Teamwork Champions.
Teamwork Champions. Fantastic. And that's the only award that's given out at the event?
No. The great part about the elimination rounds is that's where you find out where all those judged awards come from, or who won those judged awards. And so you had your interviews, the judges deliberated in their judges' room, and they came up with, it could be the Judges Award, it could be the Design Award, the Excellence Award.
It could be. I mean, so how do I know what awards are going to be given at a specific event?
Yeah, so every tournament could be a little bit different, but every event will have an Excellence Award. They'll have a Skills Champion, they'll have a Design Award, and they'll have a Judges Award. And then there's all these other, auxiliary awards, I guess you could call, that could be included in that. But if you go to the event page on Robot Events, there's a section for awards, and they'll show you what the awards are that are being offered, and then what they qualify for. So they may qualify for regional events as a state tournament, for example, or they might not qualify for any event. So they'll let you know. So those are the awards that you may want to target as a team when you're looking at the judging rubric and where you want to put your efforts to.
All right, so the awards are given out, and it's the end of the tournament. Everybody goes home, and they're exhausted, right? And then tell me just quickly, what is the chatter like on that car ride home? Are the students, do they keep talking about robots, or are they just on their devices and they've checked out?
So Yeah, there's some sleeping that happens. So this varies a little bit depending on how your students transport home. Again, you know, I've been in that college program myself. I've dealt with some high school teams. My current VEX IQ teams, all the students are required to get their own transportation, so they transport home with parents. However, I always have a meeting with my students. It's just a 5-minute check-in after awards before they can leave an event.
Oh.
And then we have a wrap-up meeting at the school the next school day after an event where we talk about it, because there are a lot of ideas. Ooh, we should try this. You know, this, we never thought about this, but there were some teams that had something that shot this or moved this or lifted like this. Maybe we could build something like that. If you ride together, there's always a chatter going on. Did you guys see this? Did you try? You know, we should do this. And it goes even beyond the robot. Did you see those shirts? Did you see what those guys? And
it becomes a one-upsmanship in some
it's-
ways, huh?
Sometimes it's, you know, that the high afterwards of talking about it and getting excited about it is even more than the tournament at times. I know
So, have
we
you ever-
drove to Dallas, Texas for Worlds, and the whole ride home, 19 hours in a van with middle school students talking about next year in the new game and wanting to build a robot. I thought they were going to have one built by the time we made it back to Minnesota.
Nice. So have you ever had a team that just bombed? I mean, they were just performed horribly at an event, and they knew it. And did they bounce back from that low point? How did they ingest that, and what was their reaction to just not doing anywhere near what they hoped?
Yeah, I think that's like the number one reason I like to participate in this specific competition is there are so many more opportunities for the students to go out there and try again. So if they do bomb, especially if it's early in the year, you know, my teams have always competed in at least 3 events, if not 4. So that's a great thing to say. Hey, you've got 2 more events to get better. You got more opportunities, do some more research, and bounce back. So usually they bounce back pretty quick. Yeah, I would say.
Sweet. All right. Well, I think we're getting near the end of this particular segment. It was all about getting ready and what's involved with a VEX IQ tournament. Any other closing thoughts? The things that we didn't quite get to?
I think we covered most of it. The number one thing, again, I'll kind of go back to if you're new to the tournament, you know, coaches want to talk about coaching just as much as students want to talk about their robots. And then the other thing, take some time, learn the manual, learn the inspection checklist. Knowing those things, it'll make a world of difference at your first tournament.
Yeah, and I say we've talked about it already, but just make sure you communicate with your parents that they have behavior expectations at the event as well, not just their students. So communicating to both parties, so we don't have parents tapping the MC on the shoulder asking them about a game rule, right?
All right, yeah, it's a student-centered competition, so if there's a challenge that happens at an event, it's the competitors that need to bring it to the attention of the volunteers, and that teaches our competitors the ability of, how do you handle a controversial thing? How do you deal with difficult situations? And that is a fantastic skill for our students to learn, and it's a fantastic skill for our adults to learn as well. So with that, we're going to close out this segment. Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you, Jared. I appreciate your comments, and thank you for being excellent VRC and VEX IQ coaches. Thank you.